The letter arrived on a day like any other. Gray clouds pressed low against the horizon, smothering the faint winter light that seeped through my apartment's windows. The envelope was a strange thing, made of thick, yellowed parchment sealed with dark blue wax, bearing an unfamiliar sigil, a hollow circle encased in twisting vines. It bore no return address. The contents were stranger still. A single line written in an elegant, looping script. Find me where shadows whisper and secrets dwell. Time is not on your side. Beneath it, a rough sketch of the city's east end, marked with a small X. I didn't know why I went. Perhaps it was the faint, nagging familiarity of the handwriting, or the faint perfume of lavender and ash clinging to the parchment. Perhaps it was desperation. Since Reese had fallen ill, life had become a gray void of hospital visits and unanswered questions. The doctors called it soul fragmentation, a term spoken in hushed, almost embarrassed tones, as if they weren't sure whether to treat it as a medical condition or a bedtime story, but deep down I knew. I'd seen the light drain from his eyes, his laughter fade into silence. Whatever was happening to Reese, it wasn't normal, and no one could stop it. So I followed the map. The X led to a nondescript alley on the edge of the district, flanked by cracked cobblestones and graffiti-covered walls. Nestled between two abandoned storefronts, a narrow iron-bound door loomed like an afterthought. There was no name, no signage, only the faint etching of that same sigil from the letter, barely visible in the rust. The air felt wrong here, thicker, heavier. A faint hum reverberated through the walls, too low to hear, but vibrating just beneath my skin. I pushed the door open. The interior was impossibly large, a cathedral of forgotten things. Stacks of books loomed like crooked towers, their pages yellowed and crumbling. Strange trinkets hung from the rafters. Shards of glass catching non-existent light, chains that seemed to sway without a breeze, and dolls with faces turned toward the shadows. At the counter sat an old man, his back hunched and gnarled fingers tracing patterns on the wood. His presence was both unassuming and unsettling, like an actor waiting for his cue. "I was expecting you," he said, his voice as dry as old paper. I hesitated. "Who are you?" He didn't answer. Instead, he slid a leather-bound book across the counter, its cover blank, except for the same sigil embossed in faded gold. "This will show you the way," he said, his milky eyes locking onto mine. "But be warned, every step forward will cost you something you cannot take back." I reached for the book, the leather cold and alive under my fingertips. "What do you mean? Cost what?" He didn't reply. When I looked up, he was gone. The book weighed heavily in my bag as I left the shop, its presence a constant pull at my thoughts. I didn't open it until I was home, sitting at my cluttered desk under the dim light of a single bulb. Its pages were filled with labyrinthine sketches of tunnels and cryptic annotations in a language that seemed half forgotten, the symbols shifting and writhing if I stared too long. But one thing was clear. The map wasn't ordinary. It was a doorway. The next day, I returned to the alley, clutching the book like a talisman. The instructions led me to a manhole cover, hidden beneath debris and dried leaves. The rusted metal screeched as I pried it open, revealing a ladder that plunged into darkness. I hesitated, but the book's words echoed in my mind. The path forward must be walked. The price will not wait. The descent was endless. Each step down felt like leaving a part of myself behind. The light above faded into nothingness, replaced by the faint glow of phosphorescent moss clinging to damp walls. The air grew colder, thicker, carrying a metallic tang that clung to my tongue. At the bottom, the tunnel stretched in both directions, its walls carved with the same sigils from the book. The shadows here weren't natural. They shifted and pulsed with a rhythm I couldn't hear, as if they were alive. The map glowed faintly in my hands, its lines shifting to guide me deeper. My footsteps echoed, each one swallowed by the oppressive darkness. The first sound I heard was faint, a soft, whispering susurration, like voices too far to reach. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but the whispers grew louder, more distinct. They spoke in fragments, words I could almost understand, slipping through the cracks of meaning. Lost, found, broken, essence. A cold knot of fear settled in my stomach, but I pressed on, drawn by something I couldn't name. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber, its walls lined with shelves holding jars of flickering light. Each jar pulsed with a faint glow, like fireflies caught in glass. My heart twisted as I recognized the light for what it was, fragments of people, stolen and stored away. And then I saw it. At the far end of the room stood a figure cloaked in shadows, its presence immense and suffocating. It didn't move, but I felt its gaze settle on me, heavy and knowing. "Why have you come?" it asked, its voice like the whispering wind. I swallowed hard. "I need to find Reese's essence. He's fading." The figure tilted its head, the movement too smooth to be human. "Essences are not given freely. What will you offer in return?" The room dimmed, the jars flickering like dying stars. I didn't have an answer. Not yet. The shadows crept closer, waiting. The figure in the shadows did not speak again. It simply stood, waiting for my response. The silence stretched unbearably long, broken only by the faint hum of the jars lining the walls. The glow of the essences seemed dimmer now, their light faltering as if my hesitation had begun to drain them too. "What will you offer in return?" the figure repeated, its voice low and resonant, as though it came from the air itself rather than a mouth. I don't know," I admitted. My words felt fragile, swallowed by the cavernous space. The figure stepped closer, and for the first time, I glimpsed its face, or what passed for one. It was not flesh and bone, but a mask, smooth and pale as polished ivory. The features were devoid of emotion, save for two faintly curved slits where eyes might have been. The mask seemed to shift subtly, its contours never quite the same when I looked again. "Everything has a price," it said. "You cannot take without leaving something behind." "I'll give anything," I blurted out, desperation clawing at my chest. "Just tell me what you want." The figure tilted its head, considering. "Anything is a dangerous promise. You will give much, but what you gain will not be yours forever." I nodded, my breath shallow. "I'll pay it. Whatever the cost, I'll pay." The figure gestured with a hand, long and bony, its fingers tipped with dark, talon-like nails. Shadows curled around its wrist as it raised the appendage toward the jars of light. One by one, the jars began to drift through the air, forming a slow, hypnotic spiral around us. "These are the essences of the forgotten," it intoned, "taken from those who wandered too far, lingered too long, or gave too much. Some are fragments of what you seek." One jar floated closer. Its glow was softer than the others, its light tinged with faint gold. My heart lurched as I recognized it, though I couldn't explain how. I knew it belonged to Reese. "That one," I said, my voice trembling. The figure's head tilted again. "To retrieve it, you must perform a simple act. Take the mask of the Pact Keeper and wear it until your task is complete." It raised its other hand, and from the darkness emerged a mask identical to the one it wore. The object floated toward me, impossibly light despite the weight of its presence. I reached for it, but my fingers hesitated inches from its surface. "What does it do?" It reveals what must be seen. It grants you the means to retrieve what you seek. But once worn, it cannot be removed until the pact is fulfilled. To break it is to forfeit all you hold dear. I glanced at the jar, its light flickering like a fragile candle. The weight of the choice pressed against me, but there was no alternative. "I'll do it," I whispered. The moment I touched the mask, a cold shock raced up my arm. I brought it to my face, and as the mask settled over me, the world shifted. The darkness of the chamber deepened, and the light of the jars flared unnaturally bright. The figure's mask now seemed alive, its edges shimmering faintly. "Go," it commanded. "Follow the path. Retrieve what you seek." The shadows parted, revealing an arched doorway where there had been none before. I stepped through, the weight of the mask pulling at my thoughts like an invisible tether. The path twisted like a living thing, narrowing and widening with every step. The air here felt alive, filled with a strange rhythmic hum that vibrated through my chest. My hands brushed against the walls, and I felt a faint warmth, as if the stone itself were breathing. The mask distorted my vision, forcing me to see the world in layers. Shadows moved within shadows, and hidden doors revealed themselves, their edges glowing faintly in the periphery of my sight. I followed the faint trails of light that curled like smoke through the labyrinth. At times, the trail would flicker, and I would feel the mask tighten against my face, urging me onward. Then came the whispers. They were soft at first, like the rustle of leaves. But as I pressed deeper into the maze, they grew louder, more insistent. The words were fragmented, echoing in a language I didn't understand. Yet their intent was clear. They were trying to draw me off the path. Ahead, the trail split into three. Each route pulsed with light, but only one felt right. The whispers grew frenzied, urging me to take the leftmost path, their promises dripping with false sweetness. "Not all that shines is truth," a faint voice in my mind reminded me. The figure's voice. I chose the middle path, ignoring the beckoning shadows. The air grew colder, the hum rising into a low, discordant melody. The walls around me glistened, the stones slick with some unnameable substance that pulsed faintly with a sickly green glow. My breath formed clouds before me, and the mask seemed to grow heavier. At the end of the passage stood a door. Its surface shimmered like oil on water, the sigil from the letter etched at its center. As I approached, the mask grew hot, searing against my skin. I clutched at the door's edges, pushing it open with all my strength. The chamber beyond was vast and empty, save for a single pedestal bathed in pale light. Atop it sat the jar of Reese's essence, its glow steady and warm. But I wasn't alone. Shadows emerged from the edges of the room, moving unnaturally fast. They circled me, their forms shifting and flickering like smoke caught in a storm. "To take is to face the truth," one whispered, its voice cold and hollow. "Will you pay the price?" The pedestal seemed impossibly far, and the shadows pressed closer. Yet I felt the pull of Reese's essence, calling to me, urging me to act before it was too late. I stepped forward, the mask growing heavier, the whispers turning to screams. The air in the chamber was alive, pulsing with a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat, fast, erratic, and wrong. The shadows writhed around me, moving in unnatural ways, their edges fraying, like strands of smoke caught in a wind that didn't exist. The jar containing Reese's essence glowed faintly atop the pedestal, its warm light a fragile beacon amidst the suffocating dark. Each step toward it felt like pushing through water, a heavy, unseen force dragging against my limbs. The mask clung to my face, growing hotter, its grip tightening as though it were becoming part of me. The whispers returned, but louder now, their fragmented words seeping into my thoughts like ink spreading through water. Turn back, not yours, already lost. I didn't listen. I couldn't. Reese's name pulsed in my chest with every step, a reminder of why I was here. As I reached the pedestal, the shadows recoiled, pulling back like a tide. For a brief moment, the oppressive weight lifted, and the jar's light bathed me in warmth. My hands trembled as I reached out, but before I could touch it, a voice broke through the silence, a deep, resonant tone that vibrated through the very air. Do you truly understand what you take? I spun around. The masked figure from before was there, though its form seemed larger now, its presence filling the chamber. Its mask shifted subtly, the hollow slits for eyes glowing faintly with a light that mirrored the jar's essence. It's his, I said, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my throat. It belongs to him. The figure tilted its head, the motion unnervingly smooth. Belonging is a fragile concept. What was once his is now claimed. To return it, you must offer something greater. Balance must be preserved. I hesitated, the weight of the mask growing unbearable. What do you want from me? The figure gestured to the shadows, which surged forward, circling the jar like a living tide. The mask reveals truth, yet it also binds. You have seen the path, and now you must decide. To restore your partner, you must give what he has lost. Not in part, but in whole. The chamber grew colder, and I felt the mask's pull deep in my mind, as though it were sifting through my thoughts, searching for something. Images flashed before my eyes, memories of Reese and me, moments of laughter, of shared secrets. And then, the most recent memories, the emptiness in his eyes, the way his voice had faltered like a fading echo. You mean, my essence, I whispered. The figure's silence was answer enough. My heart pounded as I looked at the jar, its glow steady and warm. The weight of the choice bore down on me. To restore Reese, I would have to give up everything, every piece of myself, every thread of my being. I would become a shadow, a whisper in the dark, bound to the labyrinth and its strange, unyielding rules. Yet the alternative was unthinkable. I turned back to the figure. If I do this, will he know? The figure's mask shifted, the faint glow in its eyes flickering. He will feel the absence, but he will not know its cause. The path will rewrite itself in his soul. He will live. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I stepped closer to the jar, my hands steady now, as I lifted it from the pedestal. The warmth of the essence seeped into my skin, filling me with a brief, bittersweet sense of completion. The shadow surged forward, encircling me in a tight, inescapable embrace. I felt the mask grow searing hot, its edges melding with my skin as the chamber dimmed, the light of the jar fading into the void. For a moment, there was silence, and then I felt it, a pulling, a tearing, as though the very fabric of my soul was being unraveled. The pain wasn't physical. It was deeper, a hollowing out of everything I was, leaving behind only the faint echo of my existence. The mask absorbed it all, binding it to the labyrinth until there was nothing left of me but a faint, flickering shadow. I don't remember how I returned. The next thing I knew, I was standing in Reese's hospital room, the jar of his essence glowing softly in my hands. He lay still, his pale face peaceful, and for a moment, fear gripped me. Fear that the ritual hadn't worked. But then his chest rose and fell, deeper than before, and his eyes fluttered open. They were clear, bright, and alive. "Eve?" he murmured, his voice steady, though tinged with confusion. What happened?" I smiled, though he couldn't see it. My reflection in the window confirmed what I already knew. The mask was still there, its smooth surface now seamless with my skin. "You're back," I whispered. Reese reached for my hand, and though I felt his warmth, I knew he could no longer truly feel mine. As I turned to leave, his voice stopped me. "Wait, will I see you again?" I hesitated, the mask's weight a constant reminder of the choice I had made. "Always," I said, though the word felt hollow, echoing through the empty spaces inside me. Outside the hospital, the night felt darker, the shadows deeper. The mask whispered faintly in my mind, and I knew the labyrinth was calling me back. Reese would live, but I was no longer part of that world. I had become a shadow, a guardian of the forgotten, bound to the Pact Keeper's labyrinth for all time.